Hello, and welcome to Jack's Gay Chats. A couple of my followers on this channel had experiences with change ministries and asked me to talk about what I knew about them. My experience was when we had AIDS hospice houses in Long Beach in the mid-1980s. These hospice houses were usually older homes that were usually 4 or 5 or 6 bedrooms, and they would welcome PWAs, that means persons with AIDS, to stay there. Some would charge $250 a month, some $1,200 a month. Some would not charge anything if the person couldn't afford it. When people contracted AIDS, it was such a mystery, and there was so much fear about AIDS that their family didn't want to talk to them or meet with them. Even friends, even gay friends, were at a distance. They just didn't want anything to do with people with AIDS. They were afraid. There was no place for people to go who had AIDS. They couldn't go home. You can't stay in a hospital. So the hospice houses developed as a place for them to go. In Long Beach at that time, there were no licenses for hospice houses. There were no regulations. Many of these places opened without licenses and without professional staff. So it was very casual to some extent. And on occasion, I would go visit them to check up to see how they were doing. I mean, I was promoting them to a certain extent and, having people give them money. I just want to make sure things were doing well and they were being properly administered. One of the first houses was operated by Ralph Cano and Jim Johnson as a team. They were both Catholics. They did it for about 3 years until they split apart. Jim Johnson went on his own and opened up a house called Providence House. And he was part of a overall organization called Beyond Rejection. And these kinds of names connote that there's an openness, a graciousness, a charity to help people with AIDS. And I felt okay with that at first. I mentioned that in another video that I was a hospital visitor for people that had AIDS who were admitted to St. Mary's Hospital. And I did that for a number of years visiting there. One of the fellows I talked to mentioned that he was admitted from Providence House, which is Jim Johnson's hospice house. So about 2 weeks later, I got a call from him, and he said, "There's several of us that want to talk to you." He told me to come to the backside of his hospice house. And let me explain. This was a hospice house in downtown Long Beach. I think it was on Atlantic. It was the second story that was above a grocery store. And it was originally about a 20-room old hotel that he converted into this house. So they had to come down the back fire escape because they didn't want to be seen leaving the front door because where are you going? What are you doing? There was a cloak of secrecy about this house I didn't understand. So I saw them stepping over, there was 3 of them, coming over a low fence when they responded to the signal, which was 2 honks of my horn. They came over and approached me in the car, and they got in and said, "Let's get out of here." So, okay, well, I drove a couple blocks to a Bond's parking lot. They proceeded to tell me what was going on in there. Now, these 3 young men were, they lived there, they're credible witnesses, and they told me things like one of the patients was in bed, not doing well at all, hardly moving, and the staff brought him a peanut butter sandwich and set it by the bedside. This fellow was in no condition to move. He couldn't move. He couldn't pick up a sandwich and eat it What are they thinking? And one of these three people told me, I walked by that guy's room later in the evening, and he was still sleeping, same position, and there was this peanut butter sandwich covered in ants. It just makes me think, what lack of care? Are these people getting any care at all to bring lunch to somebody, not concerned whether they can eat it or not, and leave it there, and in the evening, the guy I was talking to, it was covered with ants, and it was really shocking. I was so shocked. They told me that one guy passed away there, and quite a few people passed away in Providence House, which is expected. I mean, AIDS patients at that time, in the mid-'80s, early '80s, they were going to die. They said that one of the patients was put in the lobby, which is, because it's like a hotel, right? So the entranceway, there was a sofa, and they put the body on the sofa. And it laid there for 3 days. Relatives were not called, parents were not called, friends were not called. There were situations where people had messy bandages that needed to be changed, and they weren't changed. There were situations where people would vomit, and they would have either their vomit or their feces on them as they're laying in bed. I just couldn't believe that Jim Johnson would run a place like this. Now, he had also produced flyers for an event that he was going to host in Long Beach, which was to the effect that gay people can become straight. It was a conversion therapy talk. I got a hold of one of these flyers. It said on the flyer that he was associated with the Archbishop of Los Angeles. And the first thing I did was I called several psychologists that I knew, because I knew a lot of people into psychology. I was not a psychologist myself, but it was a favorite subject of mine. And I asked them, look, the Archbishop is sponsoring this weird, awful program to try to change gay people into straight people. And we know this doesn't work. The American Psychological Association said it doesn't work in 1974 when they declared it no longer a disease or a condition, but rather a normal lifestyle. And for an archbishop in charge of Los Angeles to do this was really strange. And I talked to these 4 people, and none of them would write a letter to the Archbishop and say, I'm a psychologist and this program is ineffective, it doesn't work, it harms people, it creates poor self-images, but none of them would send a letter like that. So I did. These are all the my communications with the Archbishop. Wrote me back immediately. He must tag my name. Any letter coming from Jack Castiglione, bring it to me, and I want to address it right away. Within 4 days, I got a letter back. It's dated November 23rd, 1987. Dear Jack, the hospice programs conducted by Mr. Johnson are neither sponsored by nor affiliated with the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. And he goes on, just a clear statement that he had nothing to do with this. But I understand from the Archbishop's secretary that Jim Johnson got a letter to cease and desist using the church as a basis or an approval of what he was doing. And the Archbishop, Roger Mahoney, had a degree in sociology. So he was aware, and I appreciated that letter of support. When I spoke about the flyer that I got about Jim Johnson and talking about how gay people can become straight, which is totally bogus, the other name on the flyer was Dr. Joseph Nicolosi. He has a Wikipedia page, and you can look him up. But he wrote books on this concept of changing people. It's called conversion therapy, that he thought he could change gay people to straight. In effect, you can't really do that. You could use certain means to get them to not have gay sex by making them feel guilty, shock therapy, other psychological practices, and feel really bad about themselves about being gay and maybe not have gay sex. But that doesn't make them heterosexual, and everybody knows it. So when Dr. Nicolosi went to Providence House, he would come in the night, which was really weird, and he would do deathbed conversion therapy. This is where he would psychologically try to manipulate a person who's very vulnerable, like a person who's dying is very vulnerable, and get them to deny their life, that all their gay activities were a sin, they were abomination. Even if they were in loving relationships, that was awful, and twist them in a psychological way where they would say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm not gay. I won't do it again." It's just totally disgusting. I think even, I know from the three guys that I interviewed, there was pressure on people there when they were dying, rewrite a will or write a will, since very few people had wills in that community, to give all of their holdings to Jim Johnson so that he can operate the house for whatever. So disgusting and so sick. This is all not just my word. About the same time, in 1986, maybe 87, the Long Beach Press-Telegram did a 2-page spread on Jim Johnson and his hospice house, and listed so many things that this investigative reporter found that were just abominable. And that's an independent source. Plus, Joseph Nicolosi wrote several books about gay conversion therapy. Amazon, just in 2019, removed those books from being sold on Amazon. I would like to add that California has a law that disallows any kind of conversion therapy on sexual orientation of teenagers. And Nicolosi's clientele were about 70% teenagers. I talked to the Gay Community Center and I said what was going on. I wrote an article in the newspaper saying what was going on. I wanted people to stop supporting Jim Johnson and his 2 hospice houses in Long Beach. So after getting this letter from the Archbishop and feeling good that he at least stepped in and acknowledged that that was not part of the church, I called all the area hospitals and I explained to the social worker that would handle this kind of placement, like where we're going to put this AIDS patient when he leaves the hospital, where are we going to put him? And I talked to all of them. I knew their names. And I said, Jim Johnson is a part of a change ministry, and found out that he is a self-proclaimed ex-gay. I don't know what that means. But he's a gay person who stopped having sex and felt that his life as a gay person was totally sinful. All of it was sinful. And they all understood what I was saying. I contacted the Long Beach Health Department and I told them what was going on, because sometimes through the health department, people are referred to various hospice houses, and they removed Jim Johnson's places off the list. I shut him down. I don't know what happened to him, but he couldn't have any patients. Nobody was sending him patients, so he wasn't being very effective. So that was a good thing. And the patients went to other hospice houses where they were better taken care of. I think he was a good guy who did bad things. He certainly thought he was doing things for God, and I don't have a right to challenge him personally. But I have the right to make a judgment of what people do that hurt people. And I have a responsibility to stop it if I can. So I felt very good about that I shut him down. And the other hospice houses continued for many years and provided a great service. I know that this talk has been heavy and very emotional for you as well for me. But let me say in closing that I attended a seminar, a 2-day seminar on conversion therapy. And I think it was the head of Homosexuals Anonymous who was speaking, claiming that gay people can be straight. And he called himself ex-gay, the same way Jim Johnson called himself ex-gay, as if they're no longer gay. I got to talking to one of the staff at the hotel. It was in a conference room at a hotel in Los Angeles. And he said, "Do you believe this stuff?" And I said, "Well, what do you think?" He says, "Well, I don't believe it. I had sex last night with the guy who was the main speaker." True. And there's even an article about that. If you have feelings on this topic, I'd love to hear them. You can comment in the comment section. And I really appreciate all the people who listen to this channel. And I would encourage you to subscribe to it so that it has some momentum and keeps going, and I could be on here and talk about more gay issues. I'm sorry this was a little heavy, but thank you for watching.